The sub 12 Newton meter wheelbase category is the most competitive of the three categories, and I decided to put the most recommended wheelbase in the sim community against this powerhouse to see if it can still lead the pack or the newcomer will shake things up. But before that, usual disclaimer, both of these bases were provided by their respective manufacturers upon my request. Neither of them will have an early access to the video and there are no terms and conditions. All of the thoughts and opinions are my own and free from any influence. Now before covering more interesting topics, let's cover the stuff that you can easily find on the internet or the user manual, just for the sake of the video. Feel free to jump to the next segment as this one will take me about 2 minutes. Alpha Mini has a custom built servo motor that outputs 10 Newton meters of peak torque, has 18-bit of encoder resolution and comes with 237 watts of power supply. La Prima has a custom built midge motor that outputs 12 Newton meter of peak and holding torque, 22-bit of encoder resolution and comes with 180 watts of power supply. They differ in size quite a bit, and the reason is that the motor in here is capable of 18 Newton meters but is limited to 12. La Prima can be upgraded to Forte by simply swapping the PCB and power supply. And speaking of power supply, this is 180 watts and this is 237 watts. Both of these bases have an all aluminum design, with this one having a functional heatsink. Now I understand that looks are subjective, so you can be the judge of which one you find better looking. Both of them offer front, bottom and side mounting. Alpha Mini has fixed bottom mounting holes, whereas La Prima offers movable T-nuts. Both offer quick release but have different implementations. Simagic went with the NRG style quick release and Asetek went with Simucube's quick release and made it wireless. Kind of. Simagic has Bluetooth connection and La Prima has a USB underneath the pogo pins, but is still wireless. Both of them are really solid and have zero flex, but it is the NRG style's loud and satisfying metal clank which reassures you that the wheel isn't going anywhere. With La Prima, I'm always extra careful as these pins are fragile. If you somehow damage them, Asetek sells the spare part on their website, and it is fairly easy to replace them. Based on all of this, it would be easy to conclude that this is the better one because it has greater number. But simply picking a base on sheer numbers and hastily jumping to such conclusions can birth misinformation, confusion, or worse, buyer's remorse. With all of the basic information covered, let's start the video by addressing the elephant in the room. Is Alpha Mini capable of producing peaks up to 13 Newton meters? There has been some speculations in the sim community that only version 1 of Alpha Mini was strong. Version 2 and 3 have been tamed. Simagic has said a few words regarding this. They say there has been no reduction in the peak torque output of any Alpha wheelbase. Some of the components have been rearranged for a more compact design and it still packs the same punch. They even attached the images showing the differences in version 2 and version 3. When I last tested the Alpha Mini against Moza R12, I had version 2. This is version 3. Strength-wise, I did not find one stronger than the other. But I had to find out if this is a 10 Newton meter base or more than that. So I started by capping the peak torque of La Prima at 10 Newton meters in software and using 80% force in-game. I did the same for Alpha Mini. And if it is truly a 10 Newton meter base, the strength levels should be similar. But that wasn't the case. Mini showed some signs of strength. So I used max torque on the software and 90% in-game, which would be 9 Newton meter for Alpha Mini and 10.8 for La Prima. Now the La Prima was unmistakably stronger. Very occasionally, similar strength levels could be felt on the Mini, but only on very specific cars. The spike wasn't that frequent, but evident. And that is what puzzled me. If the software is capping the overall torque at 10 Newton meters, it should not be exceeding that level. Maybe an occasional 10.2 or 10.3 is fine, but anything more than that seems like an odd behavior since it is being electronically limited. Similar to how the La Prima has an 18 Newton meter motor inside but is limited to 12 by PCB and the software. Or like McLaren P1's engine. Even though it is theoretically capable of pushing the car up to 400 km an hour or 248 miles an hour, it is limited to 350 km an hour or 217 miles an hour. Such could be the case with Alpha Mini. My point being, perhaps the motor is capable of producing more torque, but in any case, the limiter would restrict it. I do not have any concrete data to support my claims. I simply found the Alpha Mini to be stronger than 10 Newton meters. How much stronger? I have no idea. Maybe Simagic advertised the holding torque instead of peak torque. Maybe the peak torque is something else. You might even wonder if it is true at all, what could this stand to possibly gain from this? To which I have a theory. Maybe they drew inspiration from German automobiles as they have a tendency of under-promising and over-delivering. But don't take my words too seriously. I am every bit as clueless as you all. Believing or not on the rumors of it being a 13 Newton meter base is entirely up to you. If you ask me, I would suggest that you rely on the data that's being provided by the manufacturer. If Simagic says it's a 10 Newton meter base, it's a 10 Newton meter base. What matters is it's a good base capable of providing good experience and force feedback. And speaking of force feedback, let's talk about that. Before starting this topic, I want to briefly talk about what has happened ever since La Prima has landed in my office. In case you missed it, I did a review of La Prima where I said that in the 12 Newton meter category, this is the smoothest base I have ever tested. But smoothness isn't everything. After spending quite a lot of time with this base, I got to know one thing, that this is a horse bred for one thing and one thing only. To provide you with an amazing force feedback quality, but mainly on track. Let me explain. Detail-wise, this is an excellent base, whether be it on track or rally. But the wheel is too responsive for me in rally titles. I have not seen anyone else complain about this, so it could just be me and how I like things. After spending a lot of time with the base, I decided to jump back to Alpha U, and within a minute of playtime, I realized that my force feedback settings were revolting. I was overusing some of the settings/filters, and while I was adjusting them, I thought to myself that maybe this base is done for. There's absolutely no way it could match the smoothness and force feedback quality of La Prima. Just to find out that both Alpha U and Mini can be every bit as snappy, responsive, and rich in force feedback. This bad boy opened my eyes to filters and how they can sometimes ruin your experience. Thank you, Asetek. With the backstory covered, let's talk about my findings because they were really surprising. Starting off with what I found common across both bases. Both of them provide a realistic feel and neither of them felt artificial or digital in any manner. By realistic, I mean after adjusting the friction, inertia and damping levels, I did not feel like I was playing on a simulator. The response of the motor which I received on the steering wheel matched my real life experience. And also, there wasn't any notchiness or hiccup of any sort. Now in terms of overall smoothness, I would say both of the bases are pretty much neck and neck. La Prima takes the edge, but only slightly. Both the bases output very similar force feedback quality, despite the different encoder resolution. But there were a few things which one did tiny bit better than the other. Since I was driving the same track and car combination, I was fully aware of what I was dealing with and what to expect. Most of the highs, mids, lows, lateral forces, grass and curb texture and all of that stuff were pretty much similar. The things that I will be pointing out does not make one better than the other. Please don't jump to any conclusions. La Prima offers really rich road textures, and by rich I mean way too rich and in a good way. All of the minor bumps and undulations can be felt in microscopic levels, and it feels tad bit more alive and natural and less digital compared to Alpha Mini. When I say less digital, I mean Alpha Mini has that very slight video gamey feel on road textures, but the difference is truly minimal. Alpha Mini on the other hand provides suspension data and tire slip frequency a bit better, resulting in clear understanding of weight shift and loss of traction. When you approach a corner at really high speed, you have a few milliseconds to decide if you have overloaded the outside front suspension, which is going to result in loss of traction, or you are going to be just fine. That information gets delivered tiny bit earlier in here, and we are talking milliseconds. I am only able to even notice it in the first place is because I have tested them back and forth. When you are turning at high speeds, you will be experiencing downforce. And if you do manage to lose your rear end, that particular frequency switch from downforce to tire slippage is more instantaneous and evident on Alpha Mini. I have found to be able to catch my slides more easily and consistently, almost 8 out of 10 times. On La Prima, it's like maybe 6 or 7 out of 10. I'm not sure why it is like this, and I don't think my force feedback settings have anything to do with that. But if you think there is something I'm missing, please let me know in the comment section. Aside from this, I do not think I got any significant advantage from one base over the other. I got pretty consistent times and everything felt just great. Bear this in mind that these are not flaws that I pointed out. As a matter of fact, if you do own either of these bases, you won't even feel those things. Since this is a comparison video, I had to point out these things that I felt separates them. But to be honest, you cannot go wrong with either of these bases. Whichever one you pick is going to impress you immensely. You might be wondering if I would be able to tell them apart in a blind test, to which I would say, I don't know. Maybe. It would be incredibly hard to tell them apart. I have jumped back and forth and the differences are truly minimal. They are very, very close to each other. And if I had to pick one between the two, force feedback won't be the deciding factor. It could come down to either the wheel selection or quick release, but definitely not force feedback. Now here's the thing. Despite La Prima having 22-bit of encoder resolution, I could not find any significant advantage over 18-bit. I'm not saying there's no difference. There is, but it's not what I was expecting. I used to have this misconception that as long as the encoder resolution is high, nothing else really matters. Very recently I realized how wrong I was. While encoder resolution is an important factor that helps us understand how precise the force feedback is going to be, it's not the only important factor. The overall construction of motor, its internal components, the software and the force feedback settings matter equally. I remember when I bought the Alpha U, it used to feel very different. And I won't lie, it was a hot mess. The software wasn't good and the force feedback wasn't as refined. But over time, the software played a huge role in making this wheelbase better and better. Especially with the firmware 193, it has become even smoother. My point being, on paper 22-bit should be offering details which I did not knew existed, but it didn't. In terms of pizza, I was expecting 18-bit to be a normal cheese pizza with pepperoni, and 22-bit to be a pizza with extra cheese, chunks of chicken, more spices, oregano and some coke. But it wasn't. 22-bit was simply enhancing the pre-existing details and the joy of playing, like adding more seasoning or
cheese.
You might feel differently, but to me, the differences were too minimal to be significantly noticeable. Regarding thermals, I tested both of these bases at 90% of their rated output, and Simagic Alpha Mini is the one which heats up comparatively quicker and more. La Prima runs marginally cooler, and the factor responsible for the temperature difference, aside from the motor's overall construction, could come down to the heat dissipation by these ridges. Irrespective of the temperatures, I wasn't able to find any fading issues. Now let's talk software. Simagic has SimPro Manager and Asetek has Race Hub. Both of them offer great things, have very clean UI, easy to understand terms, but let's talk about what separates them. Starting with Race Hub, it has an option to enable shift sounds which notifies you to upshift by playing this sound. The upshift time varies from car to car and game to game, but generally it reminds you a few milliseconds before. It can be helpful at times, but like I said, it heavily depends on the game and the car. I have covered this in great detail in the La Prima review, so go watch that if you want more info on this. Next up are the safety features, which Simagic does not have any. It has auto centering, safe mode and hands-off detection. Auto centering simply keeps the wheel at center at all times, so you don't get injured if your base suddenly gets a seizure. They have further cemented the user's safety by implementing safe mode, where if the base is left untouched for a given period of time, the force feedback gets disabled. Then we have hands-off detection, which is a hit or miss. I have never found it working on Automobilista 2. On Assetto Corsa, it works alright. Then we have the slew rate slider, and boy, this is an interesting one. So essentially, slew rate is the speed at which the motor can respond to the input signals. If reduced bit by bit, a delay can be felt quite vividly after a certain point. So it's better to change this according to your liking alongside friction and inertia if you find the wheel to be overly responsive. And while we are on the subject, Simagic does not offer any slew rate adjustment. I believe it is fixed, and to decrease or adjust the snappiness, you have wheel rotation speed alongside friction and inertia. Next up, we have 360Hz force feedback on iRacing. I don't play it, so I can't tell you how beneficial it is, but as far as I know, currently SimiCube and Simagic are the only ones to offer that. Then there is cloud sharing of profile, and I believe it is quite essential as you can quickly download the settings from a certain user if you're not satisfied with your own or having trouble getting it right. You can enter the code here and the profile gets fetched instantly. Then we have one of my favorite things in here, native support for some non-sim titles such as Crew Motorfest, SnowRunner series and whatnot. Though the details on the force feedback won't be like what you get on a proper simulator because of game limitation and the very implementation of force feedback itself, it is still enjoyable nonetheless. Setting it up is also quite straightforward, just like any other game, but it requires Simagic pedals to be connected via CAN bus port. With any other set, it won't work. Then we have the game guide and sort of a manual baked into the software. In case you have some issues regarding updating or devices not getting registered or any trouble setting up the base in game, this could come in handy. Aside from these differentiating factors, both the softwares are written extremely well. Now let's talk ecosystem differences as both manufacturers have a variety of products, but it is Simagic that has more to offer. Asetek is still relatively new and very recently they came out with a bunch of different grips and buttons with different colors. I'm sure more products will be introduced as we move forward. As of now, they have 3 wheelbases, pedals and wheels. Their products are designed to be quite modular, such as I can upgrade my La Prima pedal to an Invicta or Forte. I can simply get the upgrade kit, install it and be done with it. No need to change the entire pedal set. Same goes for upgrading La Prima base to a Forte. There are a few different rim choices available for the button box. I have with me the round leather rim for the La Prima button box, and as much as I like how it feels, the stitch in here where my thumb rests hurts quite a bit, and I find it unbearable to play without my gloves. But let's move along as I will be discussing all of this in a separate video. Simagic has quite a lot of stuff. 3 wheelbases, 2 pedal set, inverted and non-inverted, steering wheel, hydraulic handbrake, haptics, an entire rig, shifters and a plethora of accessories and upgrades. They have a complete ecosystem, and like I mentioned in a previous segment, buying a Simagic base and pedal comes with a benefit of arcade game compatibility with proper force feedback support. Both of the manufacturers offer a wide variety of stuff and SimHub compatibility in certain products, so it's going to come down to your budget and choices. With pretty much everything covered, only one question remains. You see, it's not that simple. Both of them are worthy of the crown, and it won't be fair to say one is better than the other. Force feedback on both the bases is really incredible, and I guess the deciding factor will be cost, availability, software, or perhaps whose rim you find better suited or aesthetically pleasing. That's been it. I've been Darth Snape, and may the downforce be with you.